She told me, "I think it's better if we stay just friends. My ex needs my support more right now." For a brief moment, I was convinced I'd heard her wrong. We stood in the parking area behind her building, exactly where I'd intended to give her the car key I'd saved up for over many weeks. Instead, I quietly slid it back into my pocket, met her gaze directly, and said in a low voice, "Okay. I hope you find happiness." No yelling, no pleading, no demands for explanations. I already understood why. She appeared relieved, as though she'd finally released a heavy burden, unaware that what she'd let go of was the final shred of respect I still held for her. I turned around, climbed into my car, and drove off without a backward glance. Moments like those can bring a surprising sense of calm, like finally embracing the truth. Back then, I believed that was the conclusion. It was. Several months later, deep into the night, she showed up at my doorstep soaked through, mascara running down her face, with a handful of people trailing her, recording the whole scene. Emma and I had shared 3 years together. I'm a freelance photographer, the type who spends half his days pursuing perfect light instead of chasing after people. She worked as an accountant, steady, careful, exact. In some ways, we complemented one another. I introduced spontaneity. She provided order, or at least that's how I saw it. For a long stretch, our connection felt effortless. We never argued over finances, loyalty, or what lay ahead. She appreciated my steady nature. I valued her solid grounding. Yet comfort can quietly fade into the background until something more appealing appears. That something arrived as her former partner, Ryan. He resurfaced unexpectedly, now supposedly thriving, dressed in sharp suits, behind the wheel of a sleek black BMW, claiming he'd finally sorted himself out. He began texting Emma, confessing he missed her, insisting he'd improved, that he'd matured. Initially, she shared it all with me, describing him as merely an old friend going through tough times. But I noticed a shift in her voice. She began speaking of him as someone she could repair, rather than someone to steer clear of. Then the justifications started. Staying late at work, assisting with his business ideas, grabbing meals with an old acquaintance. Each time I felt the urge to probe deeper, yet I held back. Not out of blindness, but because I wanted to witness what she'd choose when left to her own truth. Apparently, that truth had a limited shelf life. One evening we sat in our usual diner booth. Her phone glowed with an incoming text. "Dinner tonight? We need to discuss something." She angled the screen away as if it stung. I stayed silent. I continued my meal. But deep inside, a weight settled, something final and undeniable. I sensed exactly where things were headed. I'd secretly been preparing a surprise for our anniversary, a modest silver car she'd casually dreamed about for months. She mentioned it once in passing, someday maybe, when life feels steadier. I wanted to surprise her, not to show off, but to lighten her daily load. Strange how you can map out tomorrow with someone already halfway gone. The following night, she asked me to come over. She said we needed to talk. Her tone was gentle, almost practiced. No tears, no visible remorse. She simply delivered the sentence that began everything. Her statement confirmed every quiet suspicion I'd carried. She wasn't departing out of obligation. She was leaving out of curiosity. I felt an odd sharpness of mind. Not agony, not fury, simply validation. All my unspoken doubts were proven correct. She wasn't walking away because she must. She was walking away to test whether the other side held more promise. So I gave a small smile, tucked the car key I'd been clutching back into my pocket, and replied, "Okay. I hope you're content." Then I left, and for the first time in ages, it didn't feel like I was giving anything up. In the weeks that followed, I waited for sorrow to crash over me. It never arrived. I kept working. I processed images. I rested more deeply than I had in a long time. Sometimes tranquility arrives simply by releasing your grip. People imagine heartbreak as sobbing alone at night. But occasionally it's merely a man in a deserted parking area, silently understanding he was never at fault. After that evening, I never unraveled. No intoxicated messages, no restless nights, no aimless drives by her place. I just continued forward. I channeled everything into my craft. I accepted more assignments that took me away. Scenery, community events, images of individuals who still radiated vitality. My work began attracting attention. A gallery in Portland reached out, inviting me to present a modest collection titled Stillness. It sold out quicker than anticipated. Oddly enough, I found it simpler to photograph serenity than sorrow. Every so often, shared acquaintances would bring up Emma. Unprompted, yet always delivered with that careful tone, as though sharing long-awaited updates. "She looks content," they'd remark. "She's with that entrepreneur now, Ryan, right?" Her ex. I'd simply smile and offer what I truly felt. The most polished surfaces are frequently the emptiest inside. And that was all. For months, she barely crossed my mind. Then rumors started drifting in. Ryan wasn't the person he'd claimed to be. His ventures turned out to be built on overdue debts and incomplete schemes. He owed funds to backers, had run up cards in others' names, and fled towns whenever pressure mounted. In just a few months, Emma had emptied her savings trying to cover his debts. She fought to hold onto her place and position. Eventually, the strain overwhelmed her. She lost the apartment. She left her employment. Friends began noticing marks she couldn't account for. I felt no pleasure, only a sense of the predictable. Those who pursue mirages inevitably stumble into hard truth. By then, I had my own world to tend to. Several months on, during a travel assignment in Oregon, I crossed paths with Lee, the editor managing the feature. We spent extended sessions examining images, debating wording, and gently ribbing each other over coffee. Gradually, a bond formed, understated yet real. She was intelligent, unflinchingly direct, and completely uninterested in theatrics. When we met, she glanced at my worn camera and remarked, "That thing has witnessed more stories than most humans ever will." I chuckled. It had been ages since anyone made me laugh without trying to repair me. We collaborated more frequently. She'd offer feedback on my shots. I'd poke fun at her tendency to overuse descriptive words in her articles. There was never a dramatic declaration, no movie-like scene. Just two individuals who felt no need to perform perfection, consistently showing up as they were. And amid the drives and late editing nights, a realization settled in. I no longer longed for Emma. I had missed the version of her I'd constructed, the one where I believed love required endless endurance rather than clear boundaries. Then one evening, my phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number after all this time. "Jack, I know I made terrible mistakes. Ryan disappeared. Everything he said was false. I've lost it all, but I believe you still have feelings for me. Can we please speak? You still care, don't you?" I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Not enraged, not sentimental, simply weary. Then I replied, "I once loved you, but that version of you no longer exists." I pressed send, blocked the contact, and set the device aside. No hesitation, no second-guessing. Because true resolution sometimes skips dialogue entirely. It's simply understanding you owe no one justification for stepping away from turmoil. The incident occurred roughly 3 months afterward. One peaceful evening, Lee dozed on the sofa, an open novel resting on her. I was working on images when loud banging shook the entrance. At first, I assumed a mistaken delivery or noisy neighbor, then the shouting began. "Jack, open this door, you spineless jerk!" I stiffened. That voice, hoarse, broken, instantly recognizable. Emma. When I unlocked and pulled the door open, the sight felt surreal. She stood drenched, gaze frantic, tears and makeup streaking her face, 3 figures behind her. Phones raised, capturing it all. I caught quiet instructions. "Keep rolling." Emma jabbed a finger toward me, voice shaking with anger. "You deserted me. You destroyed everything I had. This is your fault." For a second, I simply observed her, not stunned, but astonished at her dissent. The woman who once fussed over matching wall shades now stood on my threshold, hurling blame like someone unrecognizable. I kept my tone even. I asked softly, "Emma, what are you doing here?" She moved nearer, eyes unfocused and shiny. "You act so superior now, sharing your perfect photos while I fall apart. You left me behind, Jack. You shattered me." Her companions began yelling too, attempting to bait a reaction, cameras trained from every direction. It was obvious. A staged confrontation meant to paint me as the bad guy for whatever narrative she planned to spread. Lee stepped up beside me, composed, voice firm. "I'm phoning the authorities." Emma let out a brittle, manic laugh. "Do it. Let the world see who you truly are." I remained still, hands in my pockets, regarding her with the steady calm that unsettles chaotic people most. When I spoke again, my words were level, nearly kind. "No one abandoned you, Emma. You abandoned your own path the instant you picked deception over honesty. For a fleeting instant, the statement landed. I saw it register in her expression. Then the facade returned, and she resumed shouting, striking my chest while her group filmed. Lee stayed on the call with emergency services until officers arrived. I moved aside and showed them the clear security footage, her unauthorized entry attempt, the yelling, the aggression. The police glanced between us. One exhaled, familiar with such scenes. "Ma'am, you have to go immediately. Return here and it becomes trespassing." Emma's mouth trembled. "He's lying. He destroyed me. You don't get it." But no one believed her. Even her companions seemed uncomfortable now, gradually lowering their devices. The officers guided them off the property. As they led her away, Emma twisted around one final time, eyes burning with a mix of pain and wrath. "You'll wish you'd helped me, Jack. You'll regret leaving me to drown." I stayed silent, unmoving, until the red and blue lights disappeared down the block. Then I murmured, mostly to the empty air, "No, Emma. The regret is already yours to carry." I shut the door, secured the lock, and stood in the stillness, rain pattering outside where her storm had raged moments before. Lee took my hand gently and asked, "You all right?" I nodded. "Yeah, for the first time I really believe I am." After that encounter, everything grew quiet at last. A few weeks passed, then Lee and I gathered our belongings and left the urban noise behind. We settled in a modest coastal town in Oregon, nestled among misty bluffs and tall firs. I started a small photography space, simple white interiors, natural illumination, the faint scent of sea air slipping through an open pane. No trend-hungry customers, no staged grins for likes. Only scenery, everyday portraits, and the quiet I'd almost forgotten could exist. Lee worked remotely as a travel writer, covering secluded paths, regional creators, and ocean weather. At times she'd perch near the window, computer balanced on her lap, strands of hair tossed by the breeze while I worked in the darkroom. We rarely discussed what came before. There was no need. True calm needs no backstory. Time moved forward. The little studio covered expenses comfortably, and that felt like enough. I removed nearly all my online profiles, not from bitterness, just lack of interest. After dwelling in another person's disorder, quiet becomes the sweetest thing you can hear. One early spring morning, while sorting my desk drawer, my fingers touched something metallic, the original car key, untouched. The very one I'd meant for Emma that long ago night, back when I still saw her as tomorrow. I held it up, watching light play across its surface, part memory, part echo. Lee entered carrying 2 steaming cups. "You look like you discovered hidden gold," she joked lightly. I smiled. "Sort of, yes. I purchased this once for someone who never truly grasped what love requires. Now maybe it can begin a different chapter with someone who actually does." She studied me quietly, set the mugs aside, her gaze warm. "I'll make certain you never wish you kept it to yourself again." And I believed her completely. That same evening we climbed into the car and followed Highway 101, waves rolling to our right, sunlight spilling amber across the water. We rode in comfortable silence for a stretch. The radio played faintly, surf pounding the shore below. At one point Lee turned to me and asked, "Do you still think of her?" I considered it, her words, her turmoil, the earlier version of me that believed fixing things was my responsibility. Then I shook my head, "Not often. I think more about the man I used to be when I cared for her, and how much distance I've covered since." Lee smiled, reached across, and intertwined her fingers with mine. The highway bent gently ahead, and for the first time in years, what lay forward felt bright and certain. Emma faded from sight after that night. Stories circulated eventually, mounting debts, emotional struggles, yet another failed romance. Her online presence vanished completely. A few felt sorry for her. I held neither hatred nor sympathy. I simply allowed it to rest. "Releasing isn't giving up," I said to Lee one evening as we closed the studio. "At times it's the only method to preserve your self-respect. Recovery isn't about payback or erasure. It's only about arriving at peace."